Hello, and welcome to week 9 of web typography. So, this week we are going to be building your About Me pages. What you need to get started with your About Me page is your high fidelity mockup. So, again, you can make those in Illustrator, InDesign, whatever's easier for you, but it should be a pretty detailed roadmap of what it is that you are trying to build, right? So you don't want to sit down and start to code unless you know what it is that you're about to code. So I have laid out here uh, my About Me page. So I'm showing my favicon in two different orientations based on both mobile layout and desktop. I also have my navigation bar in both layouts and a portrait of myself and my statement. Like many of you, you're probably going to link to your resume from your About Me page. So I also have put in a placeholder resume text down at the bottom, which this will become a link and be how the person can access. So just a reminder, if you are going to build a new document and you want to just get the right proportions of a mobile phone, you in Illustrator can go File, New, and then if you pick to do mobile layouts, up at the top you'll have all of these different page proportions based on common digital devices. So I usually do the iPhone 876 just because it's not quite as big as some of the newer phones. So that way I can get sort of my pixel dimensions and point sizes and everything in a way that it's going to look still readable on a small device. So just a tip if you want to work with that. Also, what I like to do is typically when I make a new document, they never feel long enough, right? Like usually my content scrolls, it goes beyond onto the next page. So a way around that is I take the artboard, put a stroked line at the bottom, and then I click here to my artboard tool, um, and I drag to make my artboard longer. So just a little tip if you are trying to mimic for a client or for yourself what it looks like when the content continues to go beyond the end of the page. So, like many things in this class, we are going to design mobile first because we're going to assume that many of our viewers are going to find this first on their mobile device. So, the first thing you might want to do is work with CSS box model and put just stroked boxes around all of your content. So, doing this might help you understand what different sections you need to have of your site. So, for example, the only one that I have that doesn't have a class associated is nav, because if you remember, nav is a semantic tag for navigation bars, so I can just simply write out the word nav for that. These other ones, I'm going to have to use non-semantic tags, meaning that I'm going to need to have a class. So here I have class of icon. That's where I'm going to put my SVG of my logo. I have the class of portrait. That's where I'm going to put my photo of myself. And then I also have my class of content. And that's going to be a paragraph with also a span tag and a link tag as well. So this is going to help me kind of lay out what's to come. So I would say a good next step would be to take your high fidelity mockups and put these frames, these wireframe boxes around them. So now that we have our high fidelity mockup and our divs figured out, we're ready to start coding. So what you want to do is get a blank document. So again, you can find that at github.com/lahdesign/boilerplate. You can clone or download zip, and that will put this blank document on your computer. So next what you want to do is unzip that folder, bring it into VS Code, and open up your blank document. So I downloaded my boilerplate folder and then I renamed it to About Me. Now what I need to do is I have two assets for this project, right? I have the portrait of myself and I have my logo. So what I want to do is open up my About Me folder and then I want to go to New Folder and then I'm going to make this folder be called Assets. And in that Assets folder, I'm going to move in both my logo and my portrait. One step I have to do, which I can do on camera, is I can go to File, Open, go to that About Me page, my assets. So, like I mentioned, I always like to have a backup of my logos as a .ai file before I save them to a SVG, just because sometimes those SVGs can get corrupt. So I'm going to open up my AI file and I'm going to do File, Save As, and in the Save uh, menu, I'm going to pick SVG. So now I have that file as code so that I can animate it, do all kinds of stuff with it, but I also have it as a .ai file in case I need to go back and make edits at any point. So now I can drag my About Me file into VS Code. And what I should see is that assets folder. When I go to my SVG, I should see the code. So you can see I did a good job of naming my layers. I have an A, an L, first A, R, second A. So now that those are broken out onto different layers, I can animate them. This shape here, this layer one, uh, I could call this maybe like shape or something like that. That might be easier for me to call it out. That's the actual shape that's behind all of the letter forms. So now what I can do is I can grab this SVG and copy it so that it's on my clipboard. And now I need to come back to my index.html and build my 4 sections. So again, I can go to my high fidelity mockup and get the name of those sections. They are icon, nav, portrait, and content. So I'm going to make a div for the first one with class equals content. Close my div, and I can just paste in that SVG code. So as you remember, I can always collapse next to my SVG code. So that way it really cleans up not having to see all that information. And I can tab this over as well so that the opening and closing SVG tags line up. The next section I'm going to do is nav. Then the one after that is going to be another div with the class equals portrait. Inside that, I'm going to put my image. So img src equals, and then again, VS Code is going to pull up those folders for you. So all you have to do is click on your assets, and then I didn't do a great job naming this file. I wish I had called it like Lara Portrait, and the pixel dimensions might be helpful to have, but it's okay for the time being. You can always go in and rename later. Close that image, and then I can build my last div. So that is going to be div with class equals content. In there is going to go my paragraph text and my header and all that kind of stuff. So let's go over to go live and see what we have so far. Okay, so I'm seeing my SVG because I don't have any styling set yet. It's just taking up the full width of the screen. And then I can also see my portrait. So those are, it's a start, right? I next have to build out my navigation bar and I have to build out my content section. And then I'm going to begin to style. So why don't I first build out my nav bar? So as you might remember from last week's code along on navigation, we tend to do unordered lists for nav bars. And then inside of those unordered lists, we build LIs. And then we also need an A tag. So again, A creates a link. So an A needs an href, right? That's the most important part of a link. And that href is where it's going to point. So for now, we're just going to put a hashtag in there just to make it blank. And I'm going to put in here about. That's my first item in my navigation bar. And then I'm going to copy all of this and paste it twice because I don't want to have to recode all of that. And then I'm going to write the next sections in here. So portfolio, and I'm going to write in calendar. All right, so far we got, oops, I just caught a typo. This shouldn't say content up here. This should say icon. So that would have got confusing later when I went to my CSS if I had two sections called icon, right? So I have my navigation bar created. Let's go over to live server and see what it looks like. All right, so you can see right now I have all the default styling. I have these bullets, it's blue, it's underlined. So again, when we go over to our CSS, we're going to change all of that styling to get it to be the way that we want. So the last thing it looks like we have to do on our HTML is get the paragraph text in there. So again, that's why it can be so helpful to have a high fidelity mockup, because you can just literally go in here and grab it and then go back to VS Code and build it. So we're going to come in here and we're going to make this a paragraph tag. So I'm going to paste in all of my content. It looks like it has line returns from where there were different paragraphs. So it's a little funky in the formatting, but manageable. I could always go in here if I don't like the way that looks. It's hard to read. I could always go in here and put line returns if I wanted to. So the next tag that we're going to have to use is a span tag, right? Because I want the styling of make books to be very different than the rest of it. So for that reason, in order to get that high level of control, I can do in here a span with the class equals, and then maybe I'll call it big text, something like that. Whatever is semantic and will be easy for me to remember later. And then I can cut this out, this ending span tag, and then paste it in there. So now I have a span tag wrapping make books, and I have a way to style that text. So let's head back over to live server and see how it looks. I think we have to do a refresh. There we go. Okay, so the text is in there, no styling. So next we're going to head on over to our CSS and begin to style this. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is style my background color and bring my font in. So for the background color, I'm going to call out body because I want that to be on the entire body. And I'm going to do background color, and I'm going to do light gray. Okay, so now I have to bring my font in. So the font that I'm going to use is Montserrat, and I'm going to hit this symbol here to select it. And then I want to customize because there's a few weights that I want to get. So again, I wouldn't suggest going with two weights that are right next to each other. For example, the 400 and the 500, you're probably not going to be able to see much of a difference. So I'm going to stick with 400, 600, and I want that in both the semi-bold and italic. And then maybe I'll give myself this extra bold option as well. So if you remember, there's two places that I have to do this. So I'm going to first grab this link, and that's going to allow me to access the font. So now when I go back over to my index.html In the head, I can do a line return, paste that in. I can get rid of this in the boilerplate. I believe there's an older weight, so you'd want to get rid of that, right? You don't want to have anything that's going to give you problems down the road. And then the second thing that I have to do is set it in my CSS. So I'm going to come back over to VS Code, and in my main.css, I'm going to say that everything in my body I want to be this font. So now when I head over to my live server, that font has been brought in for my navigation bar and also my paragraph text. So that looks good. All right, so back over in VS Code, let's just kind of go down one by one and style these divs. So the next thing I need to do is bring that SVG way down, right? It's far too big. So I'm going to do SVG and then transform. All these options are going to show up. I'm going to do scale. And then this, if I was to do 1, that would mean like scale it 100%, basically do nothing to it. If I was to put in larger numbers, that's going to be like 200%. If I start to put in decimal points, so 0.5, that is 50%. So that looks pretty close to where it is on my wireframe. Maybe like 0.45 might be slightly better, but something like that sounds good. Now I have to style my nav bar. So I'm going to call out nav, and then I am going to go to list style, and I'm going to type in none. So that's going to get rid of, I thought that was going to get rid of my bullets, but let me see, what other options do I have? List, is it style type? None? Huh? I got to figure out why those bullet points won't go away. Hold on one second. I figured it out. So apparently calling out nav won't get you there. You got to do the ULs within the nav bar, and then that will get those done. And then if you remember, by default, this is displaying block because ULs are block line items. So if I go to display and then inline, all right, so again, live troubleshooting. If I call out my nav, I have to call out the li in order for it to work. And then I need to add some space to these, right? They're kind of right up against each other. So let me do padding 25 pixels, and that will start to give them some space. And then I also need to make them a lot bigger. So let me do font size. What does it look like if they're 1em? Maybe 2em? Starting to get a little bit closer to how it is on my wireframe. Then I'm going to head on over to W3 Schools and grab, I don't want those underlined links. I actually want my links to become underlined when I hover over them. So I'm going to grab this text from W3 Schools and then bring it over to my code, paste it in. So now my links are going to have no text decoration, but when I hover over them, they are going to become underlined. So now I can see that. Some other things I'm going to do is I'm going to set the colors, and I'm also going to center these. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to call out my nav, and I'm going to do text dash align, and I'm going to center align that text. All right, so I think we're about 20 minutes into this code along. I think I'm going to pause it for now and make a part 2 where we style the photo and the text at the bottom. But thank you so much for watching part 1 of this code along. And again, you're going to want to start off first with high fidelity mockups and then slowly kind of work through that code and build it. So thank you very much, and part two coming.